if you were to take me and clone me, right? And one of us, we have exactly the same background, exactly the same physical attributes, same training, and one of us has competed and one of us has not competed. The guy who has competed is always going to be better. And I'm going to say that that's true in any rule set, and I think everybody should compete under multiple competition rule sets too, which I'd love to talk about. But also where strikes are involved, right? Just as you would always rather be strong than not strong, you'd always rather be flexible than not flexible. You'd always rather have that experience with battle testing, decreasing the amount of adrenaline in your body where you've been there. Like, even if you know all the same stuff, you're going to be able to execute it more calmly, smoothly, efficiently, and effectively.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I've got Jeff Shaw for you. And Jeff Shaw was on the podcast in episode 281 when we were talking about the COVID-safe protocols that he was implementing at Bellingham BJJ, which I was very impressed with. And it was just one example of how to skin the COVID cat. Now, I don't want to make COVID the main focus of today, Jeff, but given how progressive I thought your policies were, can you just give us an update? What's your school currently doing on that front? And then we're going to get into competition, then we're going to get into your history, we're going to get into some really cool stuff. Doctor Who is on the list. But I thought we'd just have like a 5-minute COVID check-in before we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate it. And so before I talk about our protocols, I just want to say, look, the reality on the ground is different in every place. And so the most important thing that I think we've been doing that a lot of other school owners have is consulting regularly with frontline health workers, with medical experts, with epidemiologists, with your county and state health departments to figure out where the reality on the ground is, because infection rates, vaccination rates, all these things are going to vary from place to place. And so one of the most exhausting things, I think, for school owners is if you do want to do things right, you sort of have to continually be reevaluating what you're doing and how. And so the good news is my county has really high vaccination rates. Even with the Delta spike, we have been able to sort of stay at least in the mid-range. And, so we're kind of at the nervous zone. We were able to eliminate all restrictions for a while in our county before Delta came back. But now with Delta, we want to make sure we have this thing beat once and for all. And so what we've made the decision to do is we've gone, for at least the time being, to a 100% vaccination rate in the academy. So you're required to be vaccinated if you train at my spot. And the response to that has been generally, I think, very positive. We've had, I think, 5% of folks that are disappointed or that aren't going to be able to join because of that, which, of course, disappoints me. I want everybody to train jiu-jitsu, but, I also want people to be able to train with confidence. And so we had to pause our kids' class just because a lot of kids are not eligible for the vaccine yet. And we had to go to a 100% vaccination rate. When we're on the mats, and until recently, we were just mats or masks on inside, period, due to Delta. But now Washington State's health department, as well as our county health department, has advised us and the high school wrestlers that during active participation in a sport, so sparring or competition, we're demasking. I'm still having folks mask up during training or during teaching and drilling just to minimize it, to minimize risk, right? And what I tell everybody is that risk is not binary, right? Yeah. It's variable. And so vaccination, I think, is the most important tool we have, but we also want to avail ourselves of all the other tools in our arsenal too. So the other tools in our arsenal.
What is it, too. Jeff? Masks or vaccines? Vaccines or masks? Pick one. Either one. You only have one.
And just stop breathing, right? And nobody can. You just I'm trying to get everybody into that yogic regimen where we just don't breathe for like an hour.
Okay,
but
is that like the opposite of breatharianism, where you stop eating, but you just you breath? So you're
we pull prana into our bodies through the collar choke. That's how we do it here at Bellingham BJJ. But we have sort of protocols that we're going to continue to do that are not invasive, that are just better regardless. So we have HEPA filters in every room, medical grade HEPA air filters in every room. We open the doors during every class. We have fans in every room. We clear out the air during class as well as after class. And of course, we maintain our cleaning regimens. And so the big stuff is we're requiring vaccinations for now. I want to make sure that we get through the winter because the winter's, people are spending more time indoors, generally a more of a risky area for respiratory illness. And we're going to mask up during teaching, but not during sparring. That's what we're doing right now.
So I can already hear some people going, what kind of bullshit is this? If they work, then you wear masks all the time. If they don't work, then you don't wear them. And I think it goes to what you said, that risk isn't binary. And Can you go into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you mean by risk isn't binary?
Well, so I used to play poker semi-professionally, and if you have and everybody who's played poker has experienced what we call a bad beat, where you go into a hand having the best hand, but then the cards come out and you lose. And so if you run, for example, a very good hand like ace king, but you run that against a pocket pair such as pocket tens, that's basically a coin flip. But depending on the suits, there's a 2 to 5% edge for the pocket pair. And so if you and I were to play cards, and we were to play cards in one night, your ace king might beat my tens several times in a row, right? But if we were to just hypothetically push all of our chips in every time with those cards, over the long run, I would get rich and you would go broke. And that's not to say that it's a terrible decision just to give up that 2 to 5% edge in any one situation. But if a minimally invasive thing adds 2% protection, I don't see any reason not to do it. So for some things, those are a no-brainer. Like, oh, hey, medical grade HEPA filters are a thing and I can pay $300 and get it in this one room. No brainer. Nobody complains about it. It's awesome. It adds a certain amount of percent of protection. Right. I really do think vaccine is the big deal. That's the stuff that vaccination rates are the things that the health professionals tell me are our most powerful tool. And so I think that is the big game changer for us. But if you can add a layer of protection, even if it's 2 to 5%, doesn't sound like a lot, but especially when you're talking about something like COVID that grows exponentially, if we can stop it and like break that chain at anything, I'll take that extra 2 to 5%.
Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen that much research about it, but given how many other respiratory viruses are dose dependent, if we can stop your exposure from, I don't know, 1 million virus particles to 500,000 virus particles, you might only get half as sick. That's exactly right. The more of something you get, the worse the outcome is. That's exactly right. And like one of the guys that did push back against my vaccination requirement, he told me, hey, look, I just try to like keep my immune system robust, keep myself in as good health as possible. And that's my strategy to avoid the virus. To which I say, awesome, do that too. You know, I'm never going to tell anybody because that adds, you know, and I'm not, don't take my advice as a medical expert, certainly, but that adds a certain layer of protection as well, right? The more healthy you are, the more robust your immune system is, the less virus particles you're exposed to, the less chance you have of getting meaningfully sick. And if you do get infected, the less chance you have. Like the game changer that vaccination is, in addition to like stopping spread, it also radically reduces the risk of hospitalization. Yeah. And by something like 20 to 25 times. It varies from place to place. It's, this whole be healthy, be fit, it helps. It does. But this is anecdotal, but from my little world of the fire department, our 200-person fire department, we have had quite a number of guys with long haul COVID. Most of it's pretty minor. Like, it's 3 months later, I still can't taste coffee. That's pretty minor. It does mean there's something neurologically wrong, but it's minor, and some fatigue, but we still have 2 guys. So 2 out of maybe 50 or 60 guys who've had COVID who are still off. One has been off since last September. One's been off since last December. And I just found out about the second guy. Is like, hey, I haven't seen so-and-so for a while. What's it? Oh, you haven't heard? You know, he's like on in trying like 12 different kinds of inhalers and just sounds horrendous. So, and both of those guys were super in shape. Especially the older guy, like 55. One of those guys, like if he could probably run a marathon on one day's notice. Mm-hmm. And the younger guy was like 26 years old and also a runner. So this being healthy and in shape probably, I don't know, moves the needle by 10 to 20%. Yeah. But the vaccination thing is like what is it? If it's, I'm trying to do math here, if it's 20-fold protection, that's 2,000%. Yeah. So I know that some clubs that have had mandatory vaccination requirements have had a lot of backlash. There was a website in Toronto that was saying, here are the businesses in Toronto that mandate vaccines. And basically that website became a hit list for the anti-vaxxers to like go and just Yelp spam them. Yeah. I believe Google Reviews is better at weeding out those kind of malicious comments, but Yelp is basically a crooked review system. And you had a ton of people from Florida going, I will never go to this yoga studio in Toronto, ever. It's 1 star. Yeah.
I mean, that hasn't happened to us, thankfully. What pushback we've had has been polite and reasonable, which I hope continues. And it's been really small. It's been much less, like certainly less than 5% of the folks I encounter. But here's the thing. I believe in jiu-jitsu and life as a consent-based activity. And so if folks have a problem, if folks don't want to be vaccinated, that's fine. I have the choice as an academy owner to say, like, look, this is what I think the best thing to do is to protect my folks, to protect my community. If that means folks don't want to train with me, that's a price I'm willing to pay. And conversely, I'm not going to try to, everybody's reality is different. And so I know folks that do have good reason for not being vaccinated. One of my friends has an autoimmune condition, had one dose, reacted terribly to it. His doctor said, let's not do this again. I'm not trying to lecture anybody. What I am trying to do is implement the best practices that mean that that get us to what we all want, which is, as I say to guys that do push back, I'm like, look, do you think I want to teach wearing a mask? Do you think I want to have all these onerous requirements and interview all these people all the time? I want my jiu-jitsu life to be about jiu-jitsu and training on the mat and grappling and teaching and competing and all that stuff. But for now, my grappling life is about talking to the experts. And in the same way that you would talk to an expert black belt when you're trying to learn lasso guard, if you don't know lasso guard. And to make another jiu-jitsu analogy, just to return real briefly to the issue of keeping yourself in shape. Of course you should keep yourself in shape. Absolutely. And does it matter? It absolutely matters. But if you have, and all things being equal, if I'm going to compete against a clone of myself, the person that's in better shape is going to win. The person who's, bigger, stronger, faster, all those things, who has those attributes. If I clone myself, the guy who's in better shape, who's taken better care of himself, is going to win. But we've all seen a lazy old black belt utterly destroy a guy who looks like a big gold Adonis. And at a certain level, it's it's a disease, right? You being in shape does not prevent malaria. Being in shape does not prevent polio. Being in shape doesn't prevent COVID either. And so, yeah, keep yourself in shape for general health, but don't take that as a panacea against a respiratory illness.
No, that's why we take ivermectin.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just throw the whole kitchen sink at it.
Yeah, we'll if we get COVID, we'll take monoclonal antibodies, which do have data.
The one thing that does
prednisone, which does have data, but we'll all give credit to ivermectin.
Yeah, the one thing, like I said, everybody's in a different situation. I don't try to lecture people. I try to do what I think are the best practices and give the best advice I can to the people that are interested. And that's my strategy for sort of making a meaningful difference here. The one thing that does upset me is when you are an American politician or a public figure and you have tried to discourage people from taking meaningful, reasonable steps to protect their community, like discouraging vaccines, discouraging masking, and which are the two big things that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt work. And if you are one of those folks that's like, yeah, this isn't a big deal, don't worry about it, and then you get infected and that same day you get on monoclonal antibody, you throw the whole kitchen sink at it with ivermectin, you get these things that would cost the average American, I don't know about Canadians, but $10,000 out of pocket. Okay, now you're telling me you knew this was serious and you fed people a bill of goods. And that's what upsets me. It's like the folk that have honestly, whose beliefs are deeply held but misguided, I have much more patience and empathy for than the folks who are consciously selling people a bill of goods and lying, and then are like, okay, well, I told you not to do this, but by the way, I got 3 shots.
And now I'm up the Learjet and I'm going to Johns Hopkins for treatment. Yeah. Whereas you get the overloaded county hospital.
Right. Yeah. So,
all right. Hard pivot.
Good.
I exceeded the 5-minute COVID check-in by a factor of 120%, I think. So I didn't realize how late in life you'd started jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. I started jiu-jitsu at 35, and I'm super grateful. I feel incredibly lucky. I got into jiu-jitsu for the same reason a lot of people my age did, just much later. I had seen Royce Gracie in the early UFCs in 1993, and I was like, wow, I want to do that. But I was living in a rural town in Oregon, and there was really no place around me to train jiu-jitsu. So I sort of lived my life, went around the world, went and lived in Okinawa, Japan, and trained karate while I was there. Had a great time doing it, but I was doing it more as a cultural experience in addition to the martial arts experience. And when I moved back to the States, I moved back to Durham, North Carolina. And when I say I'm really lucky, like that was one of the hotbeds of Royce Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, because it's one of the first places Royce went to the U.S. And North Carolina, I still think, is a top 5 American state for Jiu-Jitsu. So shout out to all my friends out there. I'm super lucky to have gotten to come up training there. So I started when I was 35 years old. in 2010. And I walked into a Hoist Gracie gym run by Seth Shamp. Seth is still my instructor. He's a black belt under Hoist, and he owns a school in Vermont. If you're in Vermont, you should definitely go train with Seth. But I happened into the utterly right school for me at the time. And it was a tough gym filled with really tough, really cool people. There were probably 10 to 15 regulars at that time. Seth was teaching part-time. And it was a really open, welcoming environment where every role was hard. And that was awesome. We had, several of those folks are still my best friends and training partners. Dewan Owens was my first role ever. He's a pro MMA fighter fighting again at the end of September. Kim Rice, who just competed at Black Belt Pans against, I think her first round match was against Elizabeth Clay. So welcome to the Black Belt division, Kim. And a bunch of people that are awesome competitors, awesome athletes, and incredible self-defense jiu-jitsu, because that was really the focus for my first foray into jiu-jitsu. Was well-rounded self-defense jiu-jitsu based in a sort of a Vale Tudo environment. And so I'm still, and so that's how I got started training. I competed 3 months in when I really probably shouldn't have been competing, but I was like, why not? I was hooked right away because at the time, another reason I was super lucky is that U.S. Grappling was based on the East Coast. And unfortunately, U.S. Grappling's not running tournaments anymore, but it's still the best tournament organization that I've ever been around. Just really great experiences, tough matches against against tough opponents, but run really well. And I loved, if people are listening to this, and I know not everybody has this experience, but this was my experience. I went into the academy. I was like, I want to try this. And so I recruited 2 friends to come with me. And they were both better athletes, both had done more martial arts. They were both younger than me. They're both 10, 15 years younger than me. And of course, we just got trashed, right? Because in those days, you rolled your first class and and everybody went hard. And so I just got destroyed. And I was like, I love this right away. I know I want to do this. I know I want to compete. I know I want to devote huge parts of my life to this. And I turned to my friends and I was like, that was awesome, right? They're like, we are never, ever going back there. and to his credit, one of them started training again 8 years later. But yeah, so that's how I got started training. And I'm really grateful for that because to some folks, jiu-jitsu is about competition. To some folks, jiu-jitsu is about self-defense. To some folks, it's about general self-improvement, life, philosophy, getting into good shape, making friends. For me, it's about all of that. And I think the foundation of jiu-jitsu is good, solid self-defense, fundamental jiu-jitsu. And that's the base of the pyramid. And then you build on that. And if you decide, okay, I'm going to be a competitor and all I care about is winning no-gi matches, cool. You can do that. But that basis that I got, I'm really grateful for.
Yeah. It's funny, this whole sparring on your first day, that's certainly how I was brought up. And that's definitely what I have a bias towards. And I see how many organizations don't allow you to spar for 3 months, 4 months, till you finish their basic curriculum. And I understand why they're doing it, right? It's student retention. And I've kind of moved towards an intermediate position of okay, we can do isolated rolling, just I don't know, trying to get out of the bottom of mount or trying to get out of the bottom of side control. So there is still that training against resistance early in your career, or full rolling with an instructor or somebody who's high level enough to make sure that you're not going to, I don't know, tear your own leg off when you're trying to escape from some position. But I am nostalgic for full on sparring day one, just trying to murder each other.
So the thing is, I've really run the gamut on this. I've really come around on this because from the first 8 years I did jiu-jitsu, I was like, yeah, that's the only way to do it. And to be candid, I was a little closed-minded to folks that did it a different way. And so I would go to other gyms where they were like, yeah, we don't spar until X. And I was like, what? Because, just not to put too fine a point on it, the power of jiu-jitsu is that we spar hard. And I know my mount escape works if I can get out from somebody who's actually trying to stop me. I know my collar choke works if I can get it on someone who's actively trying to stop me. And so for my first, I would say 5 to 8 years of jiu-jitsu, I was like, yeah, that's the only way to do it. And I too am nostalgic for that. And there's a certain type of person that is going to be amazing for. And those are the hardcores that are always going to do martial arts, not just jiu-jitsu.
The guys who've come from a long background of martial arts training or wrestling.
Judo, tough Muay Thai folks. Exactly. For the already tough person or for the person that is immediately disposed to love jiu-jitsu, it's amazing. But like I look back on the way that we did it, and I wonder how many people that really could have loved jujitsu and really could have gotten a benefit out of it that were just like, no way. That guy was sweating into my eye and squeezing my face, and he put his chin into my collarbone, and what the hell? And like, so what we do at Bellingham BJJ is more or less is really similar to the middle path that you talked about. And let me tell you why we do it and what we do. So what we do is we have an intro class that everybody has to take. And I've gone back, I've adjusted the length of it. Currently it's 4 weeks, 8 classes. My idea is I want everybody to know at least 1 to 2 technical moves from the common grappling positions. So you're not just trying to beast out of stuff and explode because you don't know what you're doing. So even it might not work, right? Your UPA escape may not work, but you know what to do. And so I do that for 3 reasons. I do that for safety, right? Because it's just safer for everybody. Less elbows to the eye socket, less accidentally popped elbows. It's more fun because the only thing that frustrated me about my first class is when Dewan Owens was on top, smashing me, crushing my soul. I was like, I just don't know what's correct to do here. And that can be a little frustrating. It's less frustrating if you're like, okay, I know my thing's not working because this guy's just better than me, but I know my thing. I'm going to keep trying to do my thing. And the third reason is student retention. And I don't think that's a bad thing because I used to look down on it. I was a bit of a purist, right? And I was like, oh, these folks are just doing it so they can get students and it's about the money. And to some folks, it probably is about that. It's not about that for me. It's that, and I'm not to put myself on a pedestal or anything, but for me, it's about the enjoyment. And so if I could get somebody to that 6-week level where they fall in love with jiu-jitsu and they hit the scissor sweep for the first time and they're like, this is it. Now, if you have a 300-pound person crushing your face and like sweating into your eye with their chin in your eye socket or whatever, now you're like, I'm addicted to this. This is amazing. Because we do have to get to the hard training eventually, or else we don't get the benefits of jiu-jitsu. But I just want to get I want people to see how cool jiu-jitsu is before they get to that. I'm frustrated, I'm angry, and I don't know what to do, and this sucks. And so that's why we do it. And so for us, it's like, and just to finish off, so 4 weeks of no sparring. Then we do positional sparring. We're sparring with instructors. One of the other reasons I hate COVID is I used to be everybody's first role, which I would love to get back to, and I hope to get back to it someday. Because in addition to like the safety aspect, you just learn a lot about people by how they roll, and you learn a lot about who they are, what their background is, what their personality is. And then once you get the first stripe on your belt, basically I have my trusted guys, my black and brown belts and my purple belts, do positional sparring with folks. And when they give me the nod, they're like, okay, this is a person that we can turn loose. We put the first stripe on their belt, and that stripe's a visual signal to everybody that like, oh, okay, I don't have to watch that person. I can just like be like, yeah, go roll with that person. And I don't have to be like hovering over them wondering if they're going to do a flying Kimura and tear their shoulder. So.
This cool twisty leg lock that I saw used in the UFC where you grab the heel and then you bridge like crazy.
Yeah, right. Let me try rubber guard. Hey, that fly trap looks awesome. Ow, what happened to my knee?
Guilty.
It's same, right? My first night, I pulled rubber guard on a 280-pound guy because I'd seen it. And I was doing it wrong because I'd seen it on YouTube, right? And so basically he had passed my guard and I grabbed my own leg and I was attaching this 280-pound guy to the top of me. And my instructor was like, yeah, don't do that. And of course he was right.
Yeah. So how much competition have you done?
So I have between 150 and 200 competition matches. I've competed at all the major IBJJF tournaments as well as US Scrap. I've competed at most tournament organizations. It's one of the things I miss most because I was supposed to I was registered for 3 tournaments before COVID hit, including, and it's like, bummer. So I believe I don't think everybody needs to compete. I think everybody should try competing because I really do believe in the value of competition. And maybe it's not for you, but just having that one experience. What is
the value of competition?
For me, there's many values. For one thing, I think honestly, the primary value of it, people don't like to hear this, but it's true. The primary value of competition is getting ready for competition. Because if you know you're going to compete and you're like, I got 10 weeks, you're going to be better at the end of that 10 weeks, like period, if you're training the way that you should train. And so having a goal is important for folks. It's also important because I think the primary value of jiu-jitsu as self-defense is not even the techniques, although of course the techniques work. The primary value is, Stephan, if you were to grab my collar and like just yank me, it wouldn't freak me out. it would freak out every other human that has never had that happen, has never had somebody grab them in anger. And so obviously just training in the academy, that's really valuable. You don't get that adrenaline spike because you're like, oh, Stephan grabbed my collar. Okay, I know how to address this. I've been here before. It works even more powerfully in competition because like if you and I train together every day and like even if you whoop my ass, right, you're smashing me, like after the round,
you're not having that adrenaline spike anymore.
Exactly. So, oh, Stephan's just smashing me again. Okay, well, cool. Hey, let's go get a taco afterwards. But like for competition, like not only is it unfamiliar, like everybody's watching, everybody still gets nervous. Like people that say they don't get nervous, like everybody gets nervous. And that's valuable. It's also valuable to not know what your opponent's going to do because you don't know if they're a judo champion. You don't know if they wrestled. You don't know if they're just a person that's been in the gym 20 hours a week, or you don't know if someone that's like, hey, my coach told me I had to do this to get my purple belt. And so here I am. You don't know if they're going to pull guard. You don't know if they're going to throw. And the last thing, and this is a bit more savage, they don't have your best interest at heart. Like if you and I are training and you catch me in a Kimura or an omoplata and I'm being stubborn, you're not going to crank on it, right? And you're going to probably finish me, but like you're going to do it slowly and carefully because I'm your buddy, I'm your training partner, and you don't want to break your toys. It's valuable in the same way that therapy is valuable to talk to someone who doesn't have an emotional stake in you. Competition is valuable because like all that person wants to do is make you tap, and they are not going to shy away from doing mean stuff. And so it ratchets the role up. And so I think that all of those things are beneficial. And I think that I'm not going to, like, what I always tell people is these are the techniques you know. These are the techniques you know well. These are the techniques you can do well during drilling. These are the techniques you can do well during sparring. It gets even smaller for competition, right? So it gets it down to its base level. So I think competition is super important. Not everybody has to compete. Again, not everybody has to be a competitor, but just having that experience, I think, puts you ahead of 99% of people.
Yeah. I once got into trouble. I once irritated some very big names in the jiu-jitsu community by making an argument that if you have the world's best set of self-defense techniques, but you train them not, and you don't spar, that is not as valuable as having pure competition jiu-jitsu techniques, nothing but inverted guard, but you're sparring it. And it's for all those reasons that you mentioned. It's because you're comfortable dealing with pressure. You're comfortable dealing with people trying to smash you. You're comfortable with the adrenaline rush. Of course, you're probably not going to pull inverted guard in the street. But honestly, if you did, you'd be better off pulling inverted guard against somebody who's trying to smash your face than trying to use, scissor sweep number 2 if you've never done that against resistance in sparring.
Yeah.
I had to deal with a fair bit of pushback from that, from names that everybody would recognize.
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me. Like, so I will tell you the best self-defense instructor that I know and that I've personally worked with is Jake Whitfield. And Jake is a hoist black belt. Jake is still one of my primary instructors, just had him out for a seminar, knows all those techniques that you talked about, he knows every Gracie Jiu-Jitsu self-defense technique and does them well and is astute about teaching them and rigorously has his guys drill and spar them. And like, that's his focus is, that Jiu-Jitsu for self-defense. And Jake was also a pro MMA fighter and a successful one, had, I think, almost 30 fights and would do things like, but all of his Jiu-Jitsu was focused for like, if we were rolling and suddenly someone were to shout, okay, strikes are involved, you can do whatever you want, the way that we roll would not meaningfully change. Right. And because you're adhering to all these foundational principles, like you're controlling inside space, you're protecting your face, you're protecting your vital areas. And so that's why Jake was able to use, and Jake's jiu-jitsu, his jiu-jitsu is super well-rounded, but his A-game stuff is very like foundational, fundamental, basic jiu-jitsu, which is going to work in all aspects. But he would do things like the outside hook guard, which I used to call daily heaver guard, in MMA, because he was practiced at using it to control distance in stressful situations where people are trying to punch him in the face. And so I don't mind telling you, Stephan, I agree with you. I agree with your interpretation. Like, and for me, like, I'm always the guy that wants to do both. I'm like, why not both? You should compete and know the self-defense techniques. Of course you should. And I believe that. But I think if you were to be like, and I got in, not arguments necessarily, but discussions with black belts that I really deeply respect who disagree with me on this, who are from that self-defense jiu-jitsu background, and they discourage competition. And these guys discourage competition because they're like, well, if you're putting all that muscle memory into inverted guard or all these weird sport techniques, that's what you're going to do in a fight. And my argument to them is both your argument, which is like, look, I have pressure tested stuff that I know works against people that are really trying to hurt me. I'm sure I can do that against a random untrained opponent. And second, like also, I know how to play basketball and I know how to play poker and I know how to do jiu-jitsu, right? And so if a dude pulls a knife on me, I'm not going to try to play poker with him or shoot a basket at him. It's like a sport technique is not going to be, you know, I'm smart enough to know that like I'm not going to spin underneath a guy who can punch me in the face if punching in the face is involved. And so
I mean, my argument is it's a false dichotomy, right?
Yeah,
like
it is.
Do not have, you know, just because you do inverted guard, and I'm picking inverted guard as my whipping boy, doesn't mean that you can't then do, you know, basic clinch, basic outside trip takedown, you know, get to mount, punch them in the face, you know, like till they turn over, choke them out. The basic, call it jiu-jitsu self-defense linear progression number one.
Yeah.
This is a false dichotomy. If you could
100%.
only do one, I would argue that the competing in sport jiu-jitsu is better. But of course, I've also advocated that once a year or every 6 months, you should put on bag gloves and go with someone sane and have them try and punch you in the head just to recalibrate everything that you're doing. You know, if you've been working, I don't know, the 2-on-1 guard, right, where you're controlling the wrist, controlling the elbow, and kind of using a butterfly guard, foot on the hip to maintain distance. If you've been doing that for 6 months, try it with gloves on. Don't have the other guy, don't go with that guy who's going to try and knock your teeth down your throat, but go with the guy who's going to give you little shots, and let's see what adjustments you need to make, and probably it'll make your sport game better. Probably.
100%. 100% it will. Like, no one can ever be too good at the fundamentals. And the fundamentals should always include protecting your face, protecting your vital areas, especially
making
from
angles.
Yeah.
Like, if you get off to the side of your opponent, simultaneously, you've got a route to his back, you've got attacking options, you've got sweeping options, and it's really hard for him to punch you in the face.
Yeah, most definitely. Like, one thing that I'm against fundamentalism in all its forms. I think we should constantly reevaluate our positions because all humans are subject to confirmation bias. We all want to believe what we innately want to believe is true, which is why our own beliefs should be, we should challenge the things that we want to believe more than we challenge the things that we don't want to believe. And so I'm against fundamentalism in all its forms. And so I don't have a problem. Like, I think it's a reasonable debate to be had about, I agree with you for one thing. Like, the thing that I think that I'm not willing to compromise on is it is a false dichotomy. There is no sport versus self-defense thing. You should train both. You can train both. You should be smart about it. Good self-defense guys can win competition matches. Good competitors can defend themselves. It's fine. Where I think where we get off to the radical side, and the stuff that I do disagree with is the folks that discourage their students from competition. Because, and the reason I disagree with that is for the reasons I already talked about, all the benefits I think competition has and battle testing your techniques outside of the academy. But I also think that the way to think about it is not, okay, if Jeff drills his berimbolo more than he drills his punch block series and somebody cracks him in the mouth in the street, is he going to go to berimbolo instinctually? That I think is not realistic. I don't think that's the debate.
I have seen berimbolos in MMA.
Well, that's, yeah, for sure. And that's the other thing too. Like, there are folks that take the radical position on either side. And it is true that if a person is skilled enough against an unskilled opponent, you can do basically.
It would be your go-to technique. It's one of those things that comes out of like, holy shit, what just happened?
Totally. And it's one of those things where, like, if you can do that to the guy, you can probably do anything else you want to the guy too. But like, where I do fundamentally disagree with folks is folks that are like, that think competition trades off with being good at sport jiu-jitsu. The way I think about it is this. If you were to take me and clone me, right? And one of us, we have exactly the same background, exactly the same physical attributes, same training. And one of us has competed and one of us has not competed. The guy who has competed is always going to be better. And I'm going to say that that's true in any rule set. And I think everybody should compete under multiple competition rule sets too, which I'd love to talk about. But also where strikes are involved, right? Just as you would always rather be strong than not strong, you'd always rather be flexible than not flexible. You'd always rather have that experience with battle testing, decreasing the amount of adrenaline in your body where you've been there. Like, even if you know all the same stuff, you're going to be able to execute it more calmly, smoothly, efficiently, and effectively.
Well, let me ruffle some more feathers. I would argue that the real reason that I'm just going to pick on this imaginary self-defense instructor who doesn't allow sparring and doesn't want his students to compete.
Right.
That's a very niche person.
In jiu-jitsu, it's rare, but in other arts, it's still really common.
Well, or the person who doesn't allow people to spar for the first year or something till they make it to, purple belt or whatever.
Sure.
I would argue that the real reason that those people don't want their students to compete is because they're going to get their asses kicked in competition. And then they will go, hang on, wait a second, maybe I should go to that school down the block. Yeah. That's the real reason. I'll say that out loud. This whole muscle memory, you're going to get in a fight and then you're going to try and berimbolo instead of blocking the punch to the head. Like maybe that's what you say, but that's not the real reason.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. At least if we're talking about the radical.
Sure. I am making if you spar at your school, okay, then you've got a whole level of defense against my argument, which I would have to acknowledge.
No, most definitely. And like, the thing is, where we as instructors have to calibrate is that good, effective jiu-jitsu can be unpleasant to train. Because if you're at round number 9 and coach is like, go against that athletic purple belt who does CrossFit, and by the way, he's bigger than you're going to have, and if you're going hard, that's going to be unpleasant. And that's awesome. That's awesome that it's unpleasant because, train hard, fight easy, right? And that no situation that you encounter in competition or in self-defense is going to be harder than like, okay, I'm utterly exhausted going against this guy that's physically dominant, that's maybe a higher belt than me, etc. The thing is, that's not fun for some people. The people that think it's fun are the people that are always going to do jiu-jitsu and love it. And those are the people that are like, yeah, let's get back to sparring on the first day and just go at each other. And those are the lifers. And I love them. And I'd like to think I am one. But you have to strike a balance between like, everyone needs to have those experiences, but you also need to keep people's bodies together. You also need to keep people enjoying it because life is much more complex and nuanced than people want to admit. But I'm going to make a simplistic statement, which is if you have fun, you keep coming. If you keep coming, you get better. And it really is that simple. Yeah. If you're at a legitimate school, if you're at a legitimate school, then that's how it works.
Yeah. And I mean, if you've got some 55-year-old housewife who's looking for a new activity because all the kids have empty nested her and are now off at college or whatever, for her and she's been a pacifist all her life, for her, the level of adrenaline that she gets from regular sparring and the level of bravery it's required to just walk in the front door of that school
Absolutely.
And then spar for the first time is kind of equivalent to some 20-year-old guy who's wrestled and then he's done jiu-jitsu and now he's in the finals of the world. Like that housewife going for her first roll at white belt, one stripe, or whatever, is the same as that, super athlete competing at the Worlds in the finals.
Yeah, and I would extend that to I could not agree with that more. Like, people underestimate the courage that it takes to walk into a martial arts academy for the first time. If you are a person like you described, if you're older, if you are smaller, if you are a woman in some cases, if you are overweight and you're like, I feel physically like and this, by the way, is one reason that we got a downtown location with big picture windows so everybody could see what's going on inside, because I want people to not be intimidated. I want people to see those guys are sweating and they're working really hard. And boy, that guy just tapped to something crazy. But those guys look like they're having fun and they all look like they like each other and they all look like they're trying to help each other and get better. Because I think if people don't see jiu-jitsu, they can't love jiu-jitsu. And so the 55-year-old lady that you describe, maybe she has this idea that what we're doing looks like the UFC that she sees. And it's like, I don't want any part of that. But if she sees our crew, she sees that we are a diverse bunch of people, that, we're beating each other up, but we're also trying to help each other improve, to be better human beings, to be better martial artists. If they can see it, then they can love it. If they can love it, then they can come train. And give me 100 people like the one you described over one super athlete with a bad attitude, like 10 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100. Those are the folks that I respect most. And like, I want everybody to train, right? And I want everybody to reach their goals. It's my job as a coach to help you get to your goals. It's not my job to tell you what your goals are. So we have competitors that truly have potential to win elite tournaments. And I work hard with those folks. I want them to get everything they want. In terms of respect, though, man, it takes way more courage if you are 100 pounds overweight, if you are 50 years old, if you are disabled, if you are someone that is not the traditional martial arts tough person. It takes way more courage to walk in the door on the first day, and I have the utmost respect for those folks. And those are the folks that I want to train. Those are the folks that I want to encourage to train, because those are the people that here's the reason those folks matter most to me. Like, I've been thinking a lot lately about what jiu-jitsu is for and what it means in the world and what it means in my life. And here's what it means to me right now. Human beings are important, and improving human lives is important. And vulnerable people are the most important people, because if you can create a positive environment for those folks and make them have a great time and make them tougher and stronger and empower them in a way where, man, I never thought I would be able to learn how to choke someone or armbar someone or defend against a bigger, stronger opponent. If you can create an environment where those folks can thrive, the 25-year-old college wrestler is going to be okay. Those guys are always going to be okay. The tough person who's done Muay Thai their whole life, they're going to be fine. And so if you can create an environment where vulnerable people can thrive, everybody thrives.
Why don't we pivot to rule sets? So what rule sets have you competed under? Obviously, IBJJF, US grappling.
Yep. So I've competed under a ton of different rule sets. I've competed in my favorite rule set, and I'll list some of the rule sets too. But my favorite rule set is no time limit submission only, which is something that US grappling used to run. It's because it gives you true outcomes where, if you go up against the person in a 5-minute match and that person is wheezing at the end of that of 4:57, but they knock you over, get an advantage, you pop back up, and if this match went on another 5 minutes, you would win. It's like, okay, well, they won under that rule set and you have to accept that. But it doesn't give you like the true outcome of if you and me, Stephan, step on the mat and it's like, okay, guys, no time limits. We're going until one of you taps. That's a true outcome and there are no excuses. I've competed in other time and points rule sets like IBJJF and US grappling. I've also competed under the EDI rules, which are, which I have my own thoughts about that I'll talk about later, and Toro Cup rules. Like some folks might know, and if I could throw a plug in, Toro Cup is a super fight for charity that we started in North Carolina. Toro BJJ puts it on. You can check out more information at torocup.com. But every event, they pick a different charity and you can stream it this year, which is awesome. And so when we were coming up with Toro Cup, I had to come up with a rule set. And so I've also competed under ADCC rules, which are some of my favorite rules. But so the thing so let me say one framing statement, which is the reason I think everybody should compete under multiple rule sets is we all have different strengths and weaknesses. But as martial artists, we should be trying to amplify our strengths while we shore up our weaknesses. And so if you have incredible cardio, right, you might do really well at a no time limit or a long time limit match, but against a more skilled opponent where there's a short time, like maybe you're in the Masters division and you have 5 minutes, you might struggle to score points or advance position against that opponent. And that will help you work on your technique for short time situations. Similarly, like a rule set like EBI, which is not my favorite rule set, but I understand, I like it for what it is, that will force you to improve your armbar defense. It will force you to improve your back defense, things of that nature. Yeah. And so shorter time rule events force you to be more active, create action. Longer time or no time limit rule sets will cause you to be more efficient, and they will all help you develop your strategic mind. So it's really important to compete on multiple different rule sets. My favorite rule set is the Toro Cup rule set because it sort of combines what, and I would say that, right, because I made it up. And let me just also acknowledge that there is no perfect rule set, right? Just like there is no perfect martial art. Evolution doesn't mean an organism is the best organism. It means it is the best adapted to its environment. Yeah. And so what are rule sets for? If your focus is self-defense, no matter what, then no time limit submission only is an incredible rule set because you can't get tired or you die. If you want to win the IBJJF Worlds, that rule set is not something you should compete under a lot simply because it maybe gets you into habits that are not optimal for competition. So with Toro Cup, we have a 10-minute submission only round. So if there is a submission, there is a winner. If there is no submission, they go to a 5-minute points round, which uses US grappling rules. for points, which are really similar to the IBJJF rules. If no one wins that, then they go to a 5-minute golden score round where the first person to score a point wins. There are no advantages in this rule set. It has to be points. And so I love that because it is, like I said, my favorite rule set is no time limit sub only, just because I love true outcomes. But you have to make allowances, especially when it's an entertainment event, because I am one of those sickos that would watch a 3-hour grappling match. Very few people would. And so with this, it's like, okay, well, we're going to focus on the submission because that's what competition jiu-jitsu should be about. Okay, if we've gotten a certain amount of time and there's no submission, let's do points because points do force the action, which I think is important. And then finally,
and points has some relevance for self-defense.
100% they do. 100% they do. And we don't want to, because, if the rule set is correct, as most jiu-jitsu rule sets are, it's like you gradually advance position as you go up the submission ladder. And so that does have relevance for self-defense. If someone's good enough to mount you, they're good enough to beat you. If someone's good enough to take your back, they're good enough to beat you.
And generally, anytime you score a bunch of points under the IBJJF rule set, or most rule sets, you've now improved your striking position, right? If most of the time, there's probably a couple weird exceptions, but if we've gone from 0-0 and then you end up 2-0, you've now, the odds of you being able to successfully punch me in the mouth are higher than they were back when we were 0-0.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think of, he may not have invented this statement, but Dave Camarillo said something to me one time where he said, jiu-jitsu is an art of positional control leading inevitably to submission. And that's as good a description as I've ever heard. And it's one that I use because if you can dominate and control someone and you always get to the position you want, eventually you win, whether there's strikes involved or not. Like if, and when I tell my students this too, whenever I say always or never, I always want people to hear 98% of the time because there's always exceptions that are rule.
I'm trying to think of back in was it Pancrase days, Frank Shamrock kneeing the crap out of somebody from the bottom of side mount. I'm trying to remember who he was fighting. But basically, I had him in side mount, so he's a positionally dominant. And just because Frank Shamrock's cardio was insane, just basically kneed him into submission from the bottom of side mount. So that's your 1-2% disclaimer.
No, definitely. And having said that, here's my 2% disclaimer on no time limit sub only. One of my so no time limit sub only is an awesome rule set. It does have problems because every rule set has problems. And one of the things is it doesn't incentivize takedowns. If it's no time limit and it's only submission only, there's nothing that stops me from just sitting on my butt in front of you. It's the most efficient thing. Whether that makes you mad or not depends on your own training background, but that's a flaw in it. But one of the funniest matches I've ever seen is what my instructor's brother-in-law was a Division I college basketball player, a really good athlete. And for whatever reason, and he had trained a bit, but inconsistently. And so he'd go to a couple classes here and there and then skip a month. And so when you're a white belt, you don't have a good foundation. That's what getting a blue belt is for. But you might be good at certain things. And so for whatever reason, this dude had shown up on Berimbolo Day. And he has really long legs and he's really athletic. And so he just, for whatever reason, every time he came was like outside hook guard day, Berimbolo Day, right? So he gets a really good Berimbolo. And so he does this no time, but he doesn't know anything else really. So he does this no time limit submission only tournament. And he goes up against a wrestler. And so the wrestler double legs him because my man has no takedown defense. My dude recovers guard, Berimbolos, because the wrestler's like, what in the world are you doing? Yeah. Ends up on the wrestler's back, doesn't know chokes. So he's on his back. And so the wrestler, of course, being a physical athlete who knows how to grapple, eventually, although he doesn't know back escape super well, eventually is goons out of the back position, scrambles to standing, double legs him again, guard recovery, Berimbolo, because it's still a world of mystery. This goes on for 45 minutes. And the way because if one guy's really good at takedowns, but gets swept, and the other guy can sweep to the back, but doesn't know how to choke, match is going to go on for a while. And eventually the match ended when they both got tired and one guy took the other guy's wet gi and shoved it in his mouth. And the guy was like, you know what? Oh. So yeah, tournament stories. Tournaments are awesome. I really miss them. I think everybody should compete under multiple rule sets because it teaches you different stuff. And let me just also say I really miss US grappling because the other thing about and IBJJF is awesome too.
Well, I'll call up Andrew Smith and tell him to get his act together.
You absolutely should. Chrissy Lindsay, Brian Lindsay, what's up, guys? I miss US grappling. It's amazing. but like all tournaments are awesome. I love competing. I've competed at all the major IBJJF tournaments too. Those are really fun. All tournaments are, tournaments are terrific. I really miss them. And yeah, I've been beaten up on a lot of mats or in a lot of different areas.
So you're not a humongous guy, and you used to compete in the absolute. It's interesting how sports like judo have gotten rid of the absolute division or the unlimited division, because it basically, in those sports, it ended up being a second ultra heavyweight division.
Yeah. I think everybody should compete in the absolute. One of my inspirations is Hoyler Gracie, who, because the little guys don't do it anymore. I competed at light feather at 130, so I don't know what that is now, 135 pounds maybe. And now I'm fat and happy, so I would have to get back in shape to do that. But I competed at 135, and for me, your jiu-jitsu should work in any situation, regardless of what clothing the person is wearing, regardless of whether they can punch you or not, regardless of how big they are. And so to truly test your jiu-jitsu, you need to go against big folks. You need to do no-gi. You need to do gi. You need, again, everybody has their own goals, right? But if you want your jiu-jitsu to be well-rounded, and like my goals for my own jiu-jitsu haven't changed since the day I walked in. And my goals that I told my instructor were, I want good, solid, fundamental jiu-jitsu over the long run. So I'm not concerned with like near-term results. I'm concerned with, when I'm 47, which I turn next month, I want to have good, solid, fundamental jiu-jitsu. So I don't have to be the best in any particular area, but I don't want to be lost in any particular area. And I don't want to be lost if the dude is not wearing a jacket. And so for me, and I didn't talk about, as an older person, like I competed in the adult division until, I competed in the adult division up until COVID, and I probably won't go back to it. But one of the things that I love doing too, and this was an amazing U.S. grappling thing. U.S. grappling used to let you, and U.S. grappling used to let you do 8 divisions because they had under 30, over 30, gi, no gi, weight, and absolute. And you can't do that. U.S. grappling isn't around anymore, but you can't do that anymore. And the reason that you can't do that anymore is only 2 people ever tried it. And I did it twice, and I single-handedly delayed the tournament both times because the first time I had 25 matches in a day.
Good God.
And the second time I had 13 matches in a day. And each time
somebody should have been following you around with an IV bag just to make sure you were hydrated.
No, and actually, you mentioned Andrew Smith. One of my favorite, Andrew is such a laid-back dude. This is one of my favorite Andrew stories. So I had done 7 divisions. And I was running from mat to mat, and and by the way, thank you, U.S. Grappling, for letting me do that. I'm so happy I had that experience. I'm sorry I delayed your tournament for like an hour or 2 or whatever, because every time they'd be like, okay, we got to run the absolute division. Where's Jeff? Oh, he's over there. He's still competing. And then I'd get off the mat, and one of the worst jiu-jitsu decisions I ever made was they were like, okay, you're done with no gi. Okay, go to the gi right here. It's like, take off my rash guard, put on my gi, run over, do the gi division. They're like, okay, it's time for no gi absolute. All right, sweet. Let me put this rash guard back. Oh. And there's nothing worse in life than putting on a gross, wet, clammy, sweat-filled rash guard after it has cooled down and you haven't. But so that was Division 7. And Andrew's like, are you going to do the last division? And I was like, I am finishing these 8 divisions unless I get a major injury. And Andrew puts his hand on his shoulder and says, just like this, don't get a major injury. And I was like, thanks, Andrew. Now I'm a smart fighter. So yeah, so I did that. So I did that twice.
Why?
So, why
For
did
the
I do
bragging
it?
rights, or just
Because it was there, baby. There are 2 reasons. The first reason was I was literally addicted to competition. I just loved it. It was what I did, and I had the most fun. And second, I wouldn't say bragging rights. I would just say that no one had ever done it, and I wanted to do it. And I wanted to see if it could be done. And I was in good shape.
How did you do? 8
So,
divisions?
I got 7 medals.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't medal in no gi under 30 absolute. That was the one I didn't medal in. And I know I got I get the medal count wrong, but I think it was like 3 gold, 2 silver, and 2 bronze. I could be wrong. But obviously I did better in the little guy divisions than the big fella divisions. But again, it's super important to thank you for asking too. I did that at white belt, had 25 matches. Then I did it the next year at blue belt, had 13 matches. 13 blue belt matches, way more difficult than 25 white belt matches, by the way. And at the end, that was the one where I almost didn't finish because I did no gi absolute and I got guillotined by a young, awesome fighter named Isaiah Monroe, who's a pro MMA fighter now. What's up, Isaiah? He's still an awesome guy, awesome athlete, awesome competitor. I just didn't have anything left at the end of that.
So you're doing this at age 37, 38.
Yeah, 37 to 38.
Were you a marathon runner prior to this?
No, here's the thing. I'm not a naturally good athlete. I'm just obsessive at things. And so my jiu-jitsu was designed to be really efficient. And so, and I'm a big believer, like the classic jiu-jitsu instructor answer for what should I supplement my jiu-jitsu with is, no, just do more jiu-jitsu. And I think that's like 80% true. Because if you want to optimize your skills for the activity you're competing in, you should do that activity a lot. And so if you want to be better at grappling cardio, grapple more. If you want to be more efficient at grappling, grapple more.
I think the caveat to that is that training inherently involves a risk of injury. So at a certain point, especially if you're already injured or if you're prone to injuries, you can supplement, you can fill certain holes in your game. Cardio is an easy one by doing cardio in a fairly safe manner. But,
for sure.
Marcelo Garcia, my vote for greatest of all time, did almost no additional conditioning other than a short conditioning workout before class. I think that is changed a little bit now. He's got more mileage on the body, but it's certainly an approach. And I don't think anybody would disagree that most of your training should be jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, most definitely. And one of the reasons that I think that I'm an effective instructor is I can tell people honestly, like, you don't have to be a good athlete. You don't have to be really big. You just have to be dedicated. You just have to show up all the time and do jiu-jitsu all the time. And, look, I'm never going to be the best in the world, but like the things that I was able to do when I was competing, like 35-year-old Jeff would never have even been able to conceptualize doing some of those things. And the one thing, like one of my proudest achievements too, like, so I'm really proud that I did all those divisions. I also won a master's blue belt absolute division at light feather, which was, I don't like to talk about competition goals very much before I achieve them, because it's like, I want to be realistic, but I also don't want to be.
I feel sorry for the other guy in that story.
No, I always do too. He was a super nice guy too. And super nice guy. But like, and so the one bad thing about doing the absolute, and this is the reason the little guys don't do it now, is there is a higher risk of injury just because. And I'll show you this match, by the way, this finals match. It's crazy because I think he was 320. He's very big, and so my plan was, because I didn't want to be on the bottom. My plan was to go for an outside single leg and go to a rear trip, because I figure, okay, it'll minimize the risk of sprawling. Mm-hmm. Of him sprawling on me. But I am stupid. And so when you get out there and you're like, oh, I've got a low center of gravity, I feel like I can actually move this guy around. Maybe I can, go for an inside trip, go for like Kosotogake or something, throw like that. And it's like, no, idiot.
No,
physics
that's like
is a thing. Yeah. And so he sprawls on me and I fold in half like a clamshell. And to answer it, like, I wasn't a marathon runner, but I did do a lot of yoga, which probably saved my life. My back still hurts from that, but he folded me in half, like seriously, like a clamshell. And this is funny because in the video, the ref goes like this. And the ref seriously thinks I'm dead. And my buddy Jimmy, who's recording the video, like curses. He's like, everybody thought I was dead, but thanks to adrenaline, I survived. And what made me think of that, by the way, is when you said you feel sorry for the other guy. Everybody was always like, man, you always go out there and do absolute. Like, that's so brave. And I'm like, nah, man, the other guys are way braver than me, because like everybody's expecting me to lose. And nobody in the building is rooting for the big guy, right? Nobody looks at an absolute match and is like, I hope that 300-pound guy smashes, Bruno Malfacini, or like, everybody always roots. And so I'm like, if I lose, if I win, I look like a boss. If I lose, I also kind of look like a boss. And so all I'm risking is my bodily integrity, and who gives a shit about that, really?
So that was 35 matches and 15 matches. Do I have that right?
Oh, 25 and 13. 25 and 13. Yeah.
Okay. So I recently found out that you have a rather unique pre-competition psych up mechanism that I've never, ever, ever heard of anyone doing.
Yeah, I listen to Doctor Who speeches. So it's funny because I have a whole theory. Like, so I'm a big music guy, and you would think that I would have like fire up music and stuff. And so I have a bunch of playlists that I play in the gym. But one of the things that you'll see, and you see this even with fighters. My buddy Cody Malte is a pro fighter, and he thinks about things very cerebrally. He has a school called Elevate MMA, and Cody always walks out to shout, the Isley Brothers, or like a super chill song, and that's because he doesn't want to get himself like super fired up and have the adrenaline dump before he gets into the cage, right? And so you see a lot of, like, Anderson Silva had a super chill walkout song. And so, different stuff works for different people. And so some people need to be fired up. For me, I need to fire myself up, but I also need to chill myself out. And so if you watch Doctor Who, you know that the Doctor is a character that regenerates. And so he's played by different actors. He or she is played by different actors over time. And so I like the Doctor Who speeches. The classic one is the Matt Smith Doctor, where I
admit a shortcoming in my Doctor Who trivia. Is that the guy with the big hair?
No, it's the guy with the bow tie. David Tennant's the guy with the big hair. David Tennant, also an awesome doctor. But so Matt Smith has a bow tie, and he's this nerdy dude, doesn't look like much. And it's the Matt Smith speech where he gets rid of the Atraxi, who have come to destroy the Earth. And he sort of bluffs them into leaving. And if you want to Google this speech, the ultimate line is, "Hello, I'm the Doctor, basically run." And what I like about it, so I just love the character. And the reason that, and the way, so part of it is, it's this beloved character that I like to identify with and like get myself in like that competition mindset, but not fire myself up and get my adrenaline going. But it's also like, I think of, I want my jiu-jitsu to be the way the Doctor is in the world. Because the Doctor is not big or strong or scary. He doesn't have superpowers. He's not, a macho person. He tries to avoid a fight. He does know Venusian Aikido, so he's a martial artist. But he goes out of his way to avoid fights, and he wins through cleverness, guile, and in a lot of cases, compassion. And that's sort of how I try and be in the world.
Okay. Well, I think on that note, we should tell people where they can find you on the internet, where they can find you in real life. And then we'll close with the Doctor Who speech that you find most motivating.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Stephan, for having me back on. Thanks for all you're doing for the community in this time. I think it's awesome to have the resources that you're putting out. People can check me out online. I'm on Instagram all the time at Bellingham BJJ. I also have a personal account. I used to have a podcast called Dirty White Belt Radio. We're not producing as episodes anymore, but we may eventually. I just have too much to do right now. You can also email me at jeff@bellinghambjj.com or check us out online at bellinghambjj.com. And I'm not going to do a Doctor Who speech verbatim for you, but if you want to look up the Matt Smith speech with the Atraxi, I would love it.
Come on, then! The Doctor will see you now!
You are not of this world.
No, but I've put a lot of work into it. I don't know. What do you think?
Is this world important?
Important? What's that mean, important? 6 billion people live here. Is that important? Here's a better question. Is this world a threat to the Atraxi? Well, come on, you're monitoring the whole planet. Is this world a threat?
No.
Are the peoples of this world guilty of any crime by the laws of the Atraxi?
No.
Okay. One more, just one. Is this world protected? Because you're not the first lot to have come here. Oh, there have been so many. And what you've got to ask is, what happened to them? Hello. I'm the Doctor. Basically, run.